I was at my desk, sipping a mid-morning coffee prepared by my assistant. Although she had used artificial sweetener, I threatened to switch to black tea instead. My mind was preoccupied with a copyright issue that demanded immediate attention, but the federal government was delaying the release of relevant materials. Their customary sluggishness was hindering my progress. Federal employees displayed alarming incompetence, evading responsibility without explicit orders. I wondered how many individuals handled a letter before any action was taken. I found myself at an impasse, unable to proceed with my next project and facing financial losses if the items in question had to be destroyed. The rise of liberal concerns had needlessly complicated matters, even leading to changes in job titles. I felt too aged for such nonsense. "There's a young lady here to see you," Jackie Stodd entered my office, announcing. She wouldn't reveal her name but handed me this photograph. As I examined the photo, a sense of dread washed over me. Son of a cow, I thought. Why now? It was a wedding day picture of Sharon, my ex, and me, taken 18 years prior. It evoked memories of heartache, infidelity, and tears. People had assumed that I had returned to lick my wounds, and they were correct. Back then, I had been naive about money and power, but I had undergone a transformation since. "Inquire if her name is Susan or Sandra Press," I instructed, handing Jackie a USB drive in a Ziploc bag. "If she is, show her the video on this. If she requests a copy, provide her with everything and return the original to me. Return afterwards and I'll answer your questions at 4 p.m. I had embraced bachelorhood after my brief marriage to Sharon Grace McCormick had shattered my trust. I now required people to earn my trust, which was challenging. I stood at 6'4" with a 38-inch waist and weighed 200 pounds. I dedicated 2 hours after work to workouts at the gym. My once brownish-black hair had begun to gray, but I still turned heads. I had engaged in a few casual relationships, but marriage and love were no longer for me. Approximately an hour later, Jackie returned, leaving the door ajar. She informed me that the young lady still had numerous queries. She sat down, her serious expression indicating that she would not leave without answers. Gazing at me with her emerald green eyes, she awaited my response. "Do you know which one she was?" "Sandra," she replied. "Who is she? And why was she so visibly distressed?" She exclaimed that we've been lied to our entire lives, I inquired. If my instincts are correct, he was also deceived. Sandra is one of a pair of identical twins. The clip you witnessed was her mother's final words to me, recorded before our initial divorce hearing. 7 months before the twins were born, I learned of their existence through friends. I was unaware that she was expecting. The remaining items on the drive elaborate on the consequences of my contacting them. Her father, who was then employed by the CIA, had me fired from the FBI on false charges due to his animosity towards me. The documents suggest that there is a contract on my life if I interfere with their family. He was a formidable and dangerous man. She divorced me to marry my former best friend, with whom she had been having an affair for months. As far as I know, he is their biological father. How did she locate me, and what does she desire? Sandra discovered an old photograph in their attic with your name on it. She Googled you and recognized you. She also found the original marriage certificate and divorce papers. She tracked you down through Facebook and other internet searches. Her primary objective was to find a bone marrow match for her twin sister, whose time is running out. Why come to me? I'm not their father. It doesn't make sense, I protested. Her mother was with her father months before you met her. Her father ensured that Sandra suspected something and convinced doctors to perform a DNA test during the bone marrow test. Mr. Press is not their biological father, she clarified. A broad smile spread across Jackie's face as the tears welled up in my eyes. If Sandra was correct, it meant that my ex had lied to me all those years ago. I wondered if I could be their father. "I knew she was related to you the instant I laid eyes on her," Jackie stated, rising from her seat. "Her resemblance is uncanny. Jack, transmit the information on the drive to my publishers. Instruct them to release it in an untraceable manner and to safeguard my writing pseudonym. My life may still be in jeopardy. Emphasize the urgency of making it public. Subsequently, locate an individual to conduct a rapid DNA test and schedule an appointment. If I am their father, I require undeniable proof before confronting their mother. If it's true, I'll need a litigation attorney to assert my parental rights. Clear my schedule." I need to visit Susan's hospital immediately, I instructed. I must locate Sandra now. Sandra, please enter and introduce yourself, Jackie called out. Sandra stepped into the room, and the moment I saw her, I recognized the striking resemblance she bore to my younger sister at 16. I was overcome with emotion, and Sandra and I embraced, both of us in tears. Jackie captured this life-changing moment with her phone and then left us alone. Sandra, you and I have an appointment for blood testing at 1 p.m. They've promised expedited results, and I've charged it to the corporate card, Jackie explained upon her return. I've also arranged for you to meet. Overwhelmed with emotion, we left my office, taking tentative steps towards unraveling the truth. After arranging for the clinic to email the test results, we headed out for a belated lunch. I learned that Sandra had skipped school and driven the entire day, only stopping at a gas station to rest. While furious about her reckless behavior, I refrained from expressing my concerns, realizing that I might be overreacting like an overly protective father. It also reminded me of something I would have done at her age. Upon arriving at Sells, I noticed Barbara's car. I know we're here to meet your sister, but why did Jackie arrange this without consulting you first? Sandra inquired. You're about to witness what Jackie and I saw when we first met you, I replied. It will clarify why we believe you and Susan are my daughters and why I was astonished when the test results came back positive. Can I call you Dad? Sandra asked. I laughed and smiled. I'd be delighted. Sells was a family-friendly restaurant, a step above Red Lobster, with a solid reputation. The owner and hostess promptly led us to our private booth. I ordered a bottle of champagne and extra tissues. Barbara had her back to us, so I asked Sandra to wait while I approached her. Sis, thanks for meeting me, I said. Barbara looked up and exclaimed, You seem cheerful. What's happening? Barbara, stand up. There's someone I want you to meet, I said as Sandra approached. This is Sharon's daughter, Sandra. Barbara turned and stared, as if she were seeing a younger version of herself. They shared similar features: long brunette hair, high cheekbones, small ears, light blue eyes, and warm smiles. Oh my God, Barb, she exclaimed. Paul, you should have warned me. This is incredible. How long have you known about her? About 5 hours, Sandra said emotionally. I surprised him at his office. Jackie and Dad knew immediately. Seeing you, I understand why. The server returned with tissues, sensing our need for privacy. Between tears, Barbara explained that 3 more people would be joining us, so the hostess moved us to a larger table. Barbara called her husband to meet us and notified our parents to come immediately, calling it a family emergency. Mom asked what was wrong, but Barbara said she couldn't explain. We were all overcome with emotion. I received a text from Jackie informing me that the publisher had released the information and it would be aired on the 6 Honk News. We had just settled down after our first glass of champagne when Barbara's husband and my parents arrived. I chuckled upon hearing my dad's boisterous voice. There better be a good reason for this, Barbara. I and Barbara stood up to greet them. Mom, Dad, Lou, I'd like to introduce you to Sharon's daughter, Sandra Press, Barbara said proudly. My mother instantly recognized the resemblance and smiled widely, filled with pride. She finally had the granddaughter she had always yearned for. My dad was stunned into silence for once. When he finally spoke, he said, I see it, but it's hard to believe. My mom sat beside Sandra, holding her hand tightly, too emotional to speak. My dad ordered 2 more bottles of champagne, his pride evident. After our glasses were refilled, I stood up with mine. I need to explain, I said as Sandra began recording with my phone. I shared how we had met and what had transpired that day. My dad then stood up. Sandra, we don't need a DNA test to confirm what we already know. Welcome to our family. You'll soon meet 2 more aunts. Promise us that you'll always consider this family your home. Sandra took the phone and spoke. I came here seeking the truth, not knowing what I'd find. Today has changed everything for Dad and me. We didn't know until now. Meeting Aunt Barb showed me what unconditional love is. My twin sister Susan will feel the same. I scanned the table as everyone became emotional. Even my father, who never cried, had tears in his eyes. My mom held up 2 fingers, sobbing louder. I captured everyone's joyful tears before stopping the recording. Sandra added hers and her sister's information to my contacts and texted Susan, showing me the video she sent. Sandra's message read, If what we think is true, the DNA test will confirm it. Watch the 6 Honk News. Love, your twin. My mother asked if she was still in disbelief. Sandra showed her photos of herself and Susan. My mom demanded copies for her laptop, displaying them on the full screen for all to see. Sandra then turned off her phone and put it back in her purse, making me realize that no one knew where she was. My phone rang. It was Susan. I stood up and walked away to answer it. My dad noticed my tears and looked at me questioningly. Sandra mouthed, "It's my sister." My dad nodded in understanding, and I answered the call. "Hello, this is Susan. After watching the video, I had to call," she said. "I won't be home until at least 7 because I'm stopping at the police station for an update on Sandra. I'm pretending to know nothing. The police were here earlier and left their card. Any advice? Have him watch the 6 news and pay attention to the revelations about me. Tell him you'll talk when your parents aren't around and show him the video. Give him my number and ask him to text first before calling. He'll understand after watching the news," I replied. Once we have the DNA proof, Sandra and us bodies and all, we chatted a bit longer before bidding Sandra farewell, and she responded with relieved sobs. After ordering dinner, I explained to the family why Sandra was present. Immediately, cell phones began buzzing as everyone called to spread the word and gather potential matches. My mother took charge of organizing everything. "Sandra, how did you get here?" my father inquired. "I drove my old 1994 Voyager van." "It's one step up from a rent-a-wreck," she chuckled. "It's parked in Dad's lot. Take that van to my dealership in the morning. She's not driving back in that." "It's a miracle she made it here," my father declared firmly. "At her age, you were just as sensible as she is. She's determined," I observed. "What do you plan to give her?" I asked my father. "She can choose one out," he replied with a wink and a smile. "If I could choose, it would be a 4x4. "I love the outdoors," Sandra said. My dad responded with a broad grin. "Of course, because we all love the outdoors. If the weather permitted, we were always fishing, camping, or hunting." He began reminiscing about the summer I learned to water ski and barefoot, sharing many stories as if he were holding court. Both my parents insisted that Sandra stay with them for the night, agreeing that it wouldn't be appropriate for us to be alone. After dinner, Dad drove them to her vehicle and then drove it home. My mother was overjoyed, already planning to spoil her new granddaughter. Dad ended up waiting until 1 a.m. for them to get home. Around 10 p.m., the police investigator called me. It had taken him 2 hours to complete a thorough background check on me. The media was buzzing with inquiries about the information I had released. We discussed the situation and related issues, but seeing the 3 generations in the video had answered many of his questions. I informed him that we were expediting DNA tests to confirm our relationship and that Sandra was with my parents. Once confirmed, we would return to see if I could be a match for Susan. I asked him to buy us some time and promised to update him on our progress. Susan later informed me that he had reported back to her about our conversation. Once again, I was confronting my past, but this time with a fresh perspective. I wouldn't be intimidated by my ex-wife's family's power and wealth. I would use the media, the courts, and the truth to my advantage. I had the resources, the evidence, and a growing resolve. I sought not revenge, but justice through the truth. I was prepared to challenge 4 individuals and the federal government. The next morning, I was in my office, ensuring that any schedule changes wouldn't significantly impact me and assigning tasks to Jackie while I was away. Jackie kept checking the email accounts like an overprotective mother, questioning me about my day and extracting every detail she could. To be honest, I never tired of looking at Jackie Stoddard. In her younger days, she must have been every teenage boy's dream. Her naturally styled brown hair accentuated her delicate features, and her piercing emerald green eyes and full lips were still captivating. As a single man, I often admired her, but I was grateful that she never caught me looking. Finally, she received the DNA test results, printed them, and exclaimed, "It's confirmed. You are her father." Jackie immediately called the lab to send the information to Susan's specialist and began searching for the toughest litigation lawyer in New York. After vetting several candidates, she selected the most qualified and arranged a Skype chat. The lawyer agreed to work on a percentage basis, confident that with the DNA proof, we would pursue legal action against my ex-wife, her husband, and her parents for denying me my parental rights. The restrictive court order against me would be quashed, proving their deliberate actions. The alleged contract on my life, even if not factual, would demonstrate their attempts to intimidate and control me. The lawyer recognized the case's enormous potential even before involving the government. I instructed Jackie to send a gray, dust-covered box from the safe to my new lawyer. It contained legal proof that Sharon's father had attempted to destroy my career and marriage. It had taken years to collect this evidence through various levels of government. I later discovered that the police officer had released the video, turning the story into a runaway daughter finding her biological father to save her sister's life, causing a media frenzy. "Mom, it's confirmed. I'm a father, twice over." "Thank God," I said on the phone. "Be ready to leave tomorrow at 7 a.m. from the car lot. I'll spread the news." "Have you called your daughters?" Mom inquired. We were now driving a fully loaded 2023 Ford Explorer to New York. Sandra and I led the way with my parents in a tour bus and 33 other vehicles following. The tribe was on its way. When my phone rang, Sandra answered and put it on speaker. "You're being tracked by CNN," Susan said after our greetings. "There's a tour bus with a sign saying, 'The Carlsons are coming. 1 out of 141 should be a match.'" "Well, we have the DNA test proving he's our father," Sandra replied. "Dad said if it was confirmed, a lot of family would come, but I never expected this," Susan explained. "It's given me a new hope I never imagined. I can't remember feeling this good." Dad's family had spread the word, and people came out of the woodwork. I met so many relatives that morning that it would take several introductions to remember their names. I encountered first, second, and even third cousins. I'm filled with pride. "I intend to change my last name to Carlson," Sandra declared. "I never knew families like this existed. I was so overwhelmed that I almost veered off the road." That's when I made the decision to incorporate this remarkable experience into my next book. My daughters were still discussing Sandra's adventures when Susan announced that she had to go. Her mother had just entered the room. "Dad, are you okay?" Sandra inquired with concern. "I saw you get very emotional. How do you expect me to feel?" I replied. I discovered that I have 2 daughters who were raised by my ex-wife and a former friend without my knowledge. One is vibrant and full of life, while the other is near death's door. One is so strong and independent that she moved mountains without hesitation, just like I would. "And she desires to adopt my surname," I said with pride. "I was so preoccupied with saving my sister's life that I overlooked the impact on you," Sandra replied, her voice heavy with emotion. "I wasn't a suitable match because I inherited a defective gene from our mother. The emotional turmoil I've caused will linger for days. Can you forgive me for entering your life and turning everything upside down?" "No, that's what living entails," I responded through tears. "You've provided everyone with an additional person to cherish. You've given me the opportunity to be a true father. Your grandparents adore you. My mother is overjoyed, and seeing her visage in you means everything. You and your sister have become her favorites by birthright. She's been spoiling you both. When we went shopping, if she bought me an item, she also purchased one for Sue, laughing and saying that she had years of spoiling to make up for. That's Mom. You'll find it impossible to keep her at a distance." "I've tried," I said. "Barb and my sisters will boast about this for weeks. By the end, it will have become a family legend that will be passed down for years," I added. We discovered that as soon as Sharon saw the live news coverage of our arrival, she began experiencing severe panic attacks. The barriers she had erected were crumbling. Susan, feeling vibrant and cooey, confronted her as soon as she hung up the phone. "Mom, why did you conceal the truth about our biological father?" Susan inquired. When she received no response, she pressed harder. "You withheld the truth from us and made decisions about our lives. What gave you the right to play God?" Even Dad was unaware. "If Sandra hadn't discovered him and pursued the truth, would you have allowed me to perish?" Sharon had no answers, having never anticipated the truth to be revealed. Her father had despised Paul from the outset and had done everything to alienate him. Fortunately, Susan's doctor entered the room at that precise moment. "We've received DNA from a man we didn't know, and it confirms that he is Susan's biological father. He's coming for testing and has a good chance of being a bone marrow match. He should arrive tomorrow afternoon and will be under protection during his stay," the doctor explained before exiting. "Mom, my biological father is arriving with 140 others in case he's not a match. He's willing to take a chance on me," Susan stated. "He's putting his life in jeopardy to assist me." "Why?" "To him and his family, blood runs thicker than water. Despite the fact that I'm a stranger to them, I am family, and family comes first," she explained. "You must have realized that we resemble our biological father's mother. Examine this video. It demonstrates everything. Sharon watched the video of my family greeting Sandra. There was no denying that 3 generations shared the same facial features. She could no longer deny the truth. Her daughters possessed evidence, and her husband's actions were backfiring. A man then approached Susan's room, inquiring for Sharon. When she identified herself as Sharon Press, he handed her a large legal envelope stating, "You have been served." Sharon collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Susan, enraged, felt no sympathy. "Mom, why did Grandpa put a contract on my bio-dad's life?" Susan questioned, knowing she wouldn't receive a response. As Arnold Franklin Press exited a corporate meeting, he was served legal papers as he strolled down the hallway. He sat down in the reception area to examine them. The first document was a lawsuit against him and his wife for denying Paul his legal rights as the father of his daughters. The second was directed against his in-laws and himself, accusing them of conspiring to ruin Paul's marriage and career. It was evident that Paul was seeking retribution and pursuing full custody of his daughters. He argued that if Sandra hadn't located him, he would have remained unaware of their existence. He claimed moral abandonment, implying that Sharon and Arnold would have allowed Susan to die to protect their secrets. Proving otherwise in court would be challenging, given the extensive media coverage. Arnold recalled his days as Paul's college roommate and football teammate. Both had pursued Sharon, but Paul had won her heart. Arnold had even served as best man at their wedding. However, Sharon's father had never approved of Paul due to his background. He had persuaded Arnold to pursue Sharon, and with his father-in-law's influence, Paul was kept occupied with FBI assignments, leaving Sharon and Arnold alone together. Eventually, Sharon and Arnold became lovers while Paul was undercover for 2 months. Her father had recorded their affair and confronted Paul with the evidence upon his return. Unaware that she was pregnant, Sharon believed that her missed periods were due to stress. Delighted, her father witnessed Paul file for divorce immediately. When the twins were born, they knew that Paul was the father, but her father had already orchestrated Paul's firing. Sharon and Arnold married and had 2 sons. The unedited tapes would expose the conspiracy between Sharon's father and Arnold to dissolve the marriage. Arnold pondered how Sharon would react once this truth was revealed. Around 9 p.m., Sandra, I, and the group arrived at our final destination for the night, exhausted after 14 hours of driving. We ordered light meals to be delivered to our rooms and promptly fell asleep until the 5 a.m. wake-up call. Sandra and I departed early because I had a confidential meeting with the police officer and an FBI representative. The remainder of the group set off at 7 a.m. for the 6-hour drive. Sandra dropped me off at the Ego Police Department, where I met with Detective Peter Rogers and FBI agent Chad Garrido. We spent over an hour and a half discussing my former father-in-law's interrogation. I provided my lawyer's contact information and left a USB drive containing all of my evidence. I was placed under official protection until I left town and provided with a security escort. I was taken to the hospital for a blood draw to determine my potential as a bone marrow match. As I approached Susan's private room, I overheard Sandra and Susan conversing. The hospital staff recognized me by my writing name, and I autographed a book for one of the nurses. "Dad!" Sandra exclaimed in surprise as I entered Susan's room. "I didn't expect you so soon. Susan, this is our father, Paul Carlson." Susan appeared frail, her skin loose and her face reflecting her impending mortality. Despite this, her smile was broad and her eyes sparkled with optimism. "Susan, they're expediting the test. It should be completed within 30 minutes. The rest of the family is checking into their hotels. My parents are having their bone marrow drawn now and will join you shortly. If multiple matches are identified, the doctor intends to perform a dual transplant simultaneously in both arms," I said, attempting to suppress my emotions. Susan burst into tears. I sat on the edge of her bed and held her until she calmed down. Sandra captured a photo of us both crying tears of joy and relief. She exuded pride, and rightfully so. I realized the magnitude of her contributions and was overwhelmed by the sight of my 2 daughters together for the first time. "Grandma, Grandpa, come in and meet my sister," Sandra said. The 5 of us conversed for over an hour when Susan's doctor entered with a smile. "Your mother and I are perfect matches for Susan," he declared. Dr. Proctor inquired if we were prepared to be admitted for surgery at 6 a.m. the following day. We both consented. My father whispered, "Thank God. We've prayed for a miracle all the way up." "Don't you need my parents' permission?" Susan inquired. Normally, yes, but this morning we received a court order thanks to Mr. Carlson. It allows us to proceed if he or a relative is a match. The judge concurred that your mother and her husband were not prioritizing your needs, Dr. Proctor explained. Mr. Carlson will cover any expenses not covered by insurance. Sandra beamed. I'm not surprised, sis, she said. With what Mama and Arnold did, Dad had no choice legally. He had no rights, so he used the courts to prevent any delays. A security guard then informed us that we were about to appear on national news. Susan switched the TV to CNN, which revealed my identity as the author of a popular book series worth an estimated $40 million. Sandra, Susan, and the doctor were astounded. My parents gazed at me in shock. They had no idea, believing me to be simply an independent corporate financial advisor. My God, Dad, Susan exclaimed. I've read all of your books. They're fantastic. I chuckled. After my previous life was destroyed, I had to reinvent myself. Writing became my therapy. The success of my first book was a turning point, and it grew from there. I keep my books current, revealing the raw truth about world events, societal attitudes, and morals, whether people appreciate it or not. For the first time in 15 years, I checked into a hospital alongside my mother. My new daughter wished to share a room with me, but hospital security regulations prohibited it. Sandra spent the evening dashing between 3 different rooms. My father contacted some relatives to provide them with updates. Sharon and Arnold were not pleased when they arrived after work. Their attitude was met with coldness. Susan informed them that she was being prepped for surgery and would receive a double bone marrow transplant in the morning due to a court order. How, Sharon? Arnold inquired. My biological father and his mother are perfect matches. They are both donating so I can receive a double dose and recover completely. Susan said, Mom, do you know who Jason Blackstone is? He's your favorite author. Well, Jason Blackstone is a pen name for Paul Earl Carlson, my biological father. Sharon and Arnold turned ashen. They had hoped the court case would vanish, but Paul's net worth demonstrated that he sought justice rather than money. Paul had always believed in law and order, which had made him a successful agent until his dismissal. Mom, did you know that your father has been in FBI custody all day? You should check with Grandma to see if he's home. Can you explain why this is happening? Sandra and I inquired, beaming. Sandra was somewhere in the hospital, either in my father's room or Grandmother Patterson's. If you wish to see her, Sandra and I were discussing how she would handle her mother when Sharon discovered her. A security guard knocked and peered inside. Mr. Carlson, do you know what? Jackie stared, I said. He opened the door and Jackie entered. Jackie had been my trusty companion for 10 years. I had supported her through her divorce after her husband impregnated his assistant. She was now 35 and a single mother, still adjusting to single life but still wearing her wedding diamond. My family and I adored her, and I often wondered why she hadn't found someone. What are you doing here? I inquired. I'm here to do what I always do, look after you. Dr. Proctor said you'd be here for at least 3 days and suspected you were a match. Your arm will take a week to heal sufficiently for light activities. I booked a private jet and a hotel using the corporate card, Jackie explained. Sandra sent me a text message. Dad, FYI, she loves you. She couldn't stay away. I raised an eyebrow. The guard reappeared, poking his head inside. Sharon and Arnold Press wish to see you. Will you allow them in? Only after they've been searched, Jackie replied. What is your relationship with Mr. Carlson? The security officer inquired. I'm his fiancé, Jackie replied. Didn't you notice my ring? Sandra winked at me and mouthed, Told you. I stifled a laugh as Sharon and Arnold entered. Dad, I wouldn't trust these two for a moment, Sandra said. They're just trying to cover their backs. You don't know the half of it, Sandra, Jackie began. Your dad's lawyer has video evidence of your stepfather receiving a check from your grandfather as payment to dissolve your parents' marriage. If successful, he would manage your grandparents' finances for a 3% annual fee. How do you know this is true, Sharon? Sandra asked. And who are you? Mom, she's Dad's fiancée and a master researcher. Her name is Jackie Stoddard. I trust her more than you, Sandra declared firmly. Sharon's face went white. Her daughters were distancing themselves from her, and she was powerless to stop it. Jackie speaks the truth, Sharon, I explained. I instructed my lawyer to release all video and audio tapes to the FBI, including a letter from your father admitting that he paid for the recordings. Your father's hatred for me was so intense that he didn't care about the cost or who he used to get what he wanted. Is this true, Sharon? Arnold asked. Witnessing his expression, she knew it was. Sharon realized what she had lost when I divorced her. The only man who had ever genuinely loved her. Jackie, a word of advice, I said. Don't let others manipulate you like I did. Paul, I want to speak with you privately after the surgery. Right now, I need to go home and reflect. Sandra, will you accompany me to my car? Sharon requested. Sandra replied, I'll be back soon, Mom. I need to settle a few matters. Jackie, please watch over Dad until I return. We watched them leave. Sharon held it together until she exited, then burst into tears. Jackie and I both understood that she had no idea what had been done until now. Arnold, born into wealth, was paralyzed by fear. The truth had emerged, and their lives were in ruins. Sharon would never trust him again. Paul, I dreaded this day, Arnold began. I thought you'd never return. If we had met by chance, I could have shrugged it off. I never anticipated this. It's best that I leave and say no more. He departed, leaving us alone. I gazed at Jackie, causing her to blush for the first time. I was looking at her the way a man in love should, for the first time. I was finally opening myself up. Was she merely playing with me? Was she finally revealing her true feelings? Did I love her as a friend or something more? Either way, my daughters had awakened me. I had been living in others' shadows, finding joy in their excitement instead of creating my own. Jackie, we have much to discuss while I'm in recovery, I said softly. These past few days have awakened me. I became complacent, settling for the sidelines instead of being in the game. Paul, when I got divorced, you stepped in. My kids were still young. You've been more of a father to them than their own father. From baseball games to father-daughter dances, you were always there. I know why you pay me well, more than the usual rate. You want to ensure that the children in your heart are cared for, Jackie said. On their birthdays, you always went overboard, making them the envy of their friends. During summer breaks, you took us on extraordinary trips, creating lifelong memories. You answer their questions like a father should. They adore you, and you adore them. Your only flaw is your fear of commitment. I attempted to speak but couldn't. Jackie was correct, and her words struck a chord with me, as did Sandra's. I approached Jackie and sat beside her, taking her hand. I gazed into her eyes, gathering my thoughts. Sharon had betrayed me. Her father's power had intimidated. I texted Sandra to inquire about Susan's pizza preferences. She responded that Susan enjoys everything except anchovies. I ordered 3 extra-large pizzas and 3 2-liter colas for speedy delivery. I also contacted Dad and requested that he bring Mom upstairs within 30 minutes for a pizza party. We disregarded the no eating for 8 hours rule but became carried away. The head nurse arrived to calm us down but departed with a slice of pizza. Later, she stopped me and said, "Your actions have lifted the spirits of the entire floor. I cannot express my gratitude." At 4 a.m., they escorted me and my mother to prepare for the operation. We supported one another until they wheeled us in. I remained awake until the medication took effect. When I awoke, the procedure was complete. Now came the waiting and praying. Dr. Proctor informed everyone that the bone marrow transfer had gone well, but it would take several hours to determine whether it had been successful. Upon hearing this, most of the family began making arrangements to depart. "Jackie," I said, "I'm the worst patient ever." "But you're not sick," she replied. "You're like a bull in a china shop, impatient, unruly, and miserable. Continue this behavior and you'll acquire a poor reputation," Jackie warned. Jackie informed me that my mother was doing well. Once she was confident that I was stable, she returned my phone. The initial texts I received were from Jackie's children, both inquiring about when Jackie would receive her engagement ring. "Dad, when do we meet our new sisters?" one text read. "Jackie, your kids are intelligent," I remarked, showing her the phone. I informed them that I was traveling to Isago to care for you following the operation. They had numerous inquiries and the entire narrative emerged. They weren't taken aback. They stated, "Mom, he's always treated us like his own. Most of our friends wish their fathers were like him. We've always regarded him as our father," Jackie explained. She read the message and gazed at me with tears in her eyes. "I believe we'll have a brief engagement," I said with a smile. "Have you heard from the twins?" "Sandra and her mother are with Susan. She's doing well, considering the circumstances. Despite the medication, she's asking many questions," Jackie disclosed. Sandra informed her about the pizza party. "Susan can't believe how much she resembles her aunt and grandmother. She's eager for a girls' day out with them once she recovers. Find me my pants. I want to see her for myself and then check on Mom," I said. The nurses attempted to prevent me, stating that it was too soon after surgery, but I insisted. Off we went, holding hands. Surprisingly, my pain was manageable. Jackie and I noticed Susan's improvement immediately. Her complexion was better, and the sparkle in her eyes nearly brought tears to mine. "Who are Tammy and Timothy Stoddard?" Sandra inquired. "My children, ages 13 and 11, Jackie responded. "I received a Facebook friend request from them this morning." "So did Susan," Sandra said. "Both of you should read what they sent me," I said, handing Sandra my phone. She read it, smiled, and passed it to Susan. "I want this back to add their phone numbers to my contacts," I said. Sharon then requested a private conversation, so we proceeded to the waiting room. "Paul, I had an extensive conversation with my mother last night. She admitted to recalling Dad's animosity towards you, but never anticipated this. My daughters wish to complete the school year here and then reside with you. They want to change their last name to yours and believe Arnold and I's actions were unforgivable," Sharon revealed. "I can't dispute their decision. They made it clear that they would pursue legal action if I refused. They no longer have faith in me, and I can't blame them. Will you accept them? You're familiar with my family. They wouldn't allow me to refuse regardless of my feelings. I'll gladly welcome them, as will Jackie. We'll simply require a larger abode," I replied. "I'll withdraw the lawsuit against you if you consent to joint custody. The lawsuit against the remainder of your family will continue unabated. The twins are of sufficient age to make their own decisions," I added. Sharon agreed to joint custody. I offered to cover the expenses of their name change, but she declined. We returned to Susan's room together. The girls observed us intently. "Jackie, it appears we'll require a home with at least 6 bedrooms," I said. Jackie smiled, and the girls erupted in delight. "Girls, your father and I have agreed to grant your wishes, provided Jackie concurs," Sharon stated. "I'll contact the lawyer tomorrow to initiate the legal procedures for your name change. Paul, Jackie, are you prepared for this? A house filled with teenagers? No one is ever completely prepared, but we adapt." "I'm still adjusting to the concept of 2 children bearing my name," I said. "Make that 4. Tam and Tim want you to adopt them." "They're already signing their names as Carlson," Jackie said. "Call Roger Mouser's firm to initiate the paperwork. Subsequently, text the children to inform them of our plans. Let's determine which region offers the best schools to guide our new home search," I said. Sandra retrieved her phone, opened her contacts, and initiated a speakerphone call. "Hello," Tammy answered. "Who are you, and what do you want?" "This is Sandra, your soon-to-be older sister." "Is Timothy with you?" Sandra inquired. "Can you prove it? Because I can't," Tammy replied. "Dad instructed us to avoid receiving calls or messages from unknown sources without proof." "Are you attempting to deceive me?" "Tammy, Paul and I are getting married," Jackie intervened. "You were conversing with Paul's daughter, Sandra. We'll all be Carlson soon. Susan and I are changing our last name, and your father and I have begun the process for him to adopt you and change your name to Carlson as well," Sandra added. "Sweet! Inform Dad it's about time," Timothy exclaimed. "How is Susan?" "I'm doing better," Susan replied. "For now." "We're so fortunate, Sandra," Timothy replied. "We'll text you both so you can add my number." "Susan, Sandra, our dad is the only father we've ever known. Our biological father was absent before we had any awareness of him. Your father has surpassed all of our friends' parents in terms of parental care. Mom has been in love with him for a long time. When we reunite, we need you to acknowledge that we are all siblings and nothing more or less. Tammy and I will not permit anything to interfere with their relationships," Timothy stated firmly. Both of my daughters concurred, Jackie remarked, her eyes filled with tears. "They're embodying your values and principles. You should be proud that they've embraced your ideals." We bid farewell for the time being and proceeded to visit my mother. When we entered, she and Dad were taken aback. Dad noticed a look in Jackie's eyes that made him grin. He sensed that something was amiss. "Mom," I said, "you're up and about already. Have you seen Susan? How does she appear?" "Her complexion is improving and her spirits are up, so it's looking positive." "However, it's still too early to tell," I responded. "If you both have time, we need to have a serious discussion." "We're not going anywhere, so let's get started," my father replied. "Susan and Sandra will reside with me after the school year concludes. They'll change their last name to ours," I announced. Sharon has agreed to joint custody and the name change. The twins initiated the idea. "That's fantastic," both my parents exclaimed. "That's not all," Jackie interjected. "Your son has decided to make an honest woman out of me." Elizabeth, are you prepared to assist in wedding planning? My mother became teary-eyed, and my father beamed. They didn't need to express their approval. It was evident. I will be adopting Tammy and Timothy, and they will take my last name as well. Jackie and I will commence house hunting as soon as we return, I added. What has sparked this change of heart? My father inquired. We've all been aware of your feelings for one another. I've been attempting to persuade your mother to grant her approval so that you may regain your senses. Earl Carlson, behave yourself. You're not at a car dealership, Mom remarked. Jackie, have you given any thought to your wedding plans? We haven't discussed it in detail, but because we're merging 3 families, it should be a family affair. Barb could serve as my maid of honor. Paul could be the best man. His brothers-in-law could be ushers. Susan and Sandra could be bridesmaids. Tammy could be the flower girl, and Timothy could be the ring bearer. Dad, would you accompany me down the aisle with my father? Jackie inquired with a smile. Depends on who's paying the bills and if the 19th hole is stocked with Jack Daniels, Dad replied, laughing. What do you think, Paul? Jackie asked. It's perfect. It will unite us all. If that's your desire, let's do it, I responded. Should we invite Sharon? Both my parents asked firmly. Mom, Dad, a lot will be revealed by the media in the coming weeks. I'm initiating legal action against the federal government, Sharon's parents, and her husband. I believe Sharon has suffered as much as I have. I paid the price years ago, and now Sharon is paying in ways we can only speculate. She believes she has lost her daughters forever, I explained. Inviting her may assist the twins in establishing a new relationship with her and moving on from the past. Jackie and my parents gazed at me in awe. Where did this wisdom originate? My father asked thoughtfully. These past few days have taught me a great deal, I replied, clasping Jackie's hand. Sandra's arrival has instilled a new appreciation for life in me. We returned to my room, and I promptly fell asleep, exhausted from the surgery. Jackie remained by my side and monitored the news. Christopher McCormick and Arnold Press had been arrested for lying to the FBI. The individual behind the contract on my life had turned state's evidence. My lawyer made public the details of my dismissal from the FBI, prompting an internal investigation. When I awoke, Jackie provided me with an update. Dr. Proctor informed us that my mother and I would be discharged the following day. You'll require follow-up appointments and to have your stitches removed, he said. Susan is progressing better than anticipated. The major question is how she'll react as her medication is gradually reduced. We spoke with my parents, who decided to remain in the city until Susan was well on her road to recovery. They would accompany us on the private plane that Dad had booked and stay at the same hotel as Jackie and me. The bus driver was instructed to return over the next few days. The media exposed the deception, backstabbing, and political machinations that had destroyed my marriage and career. They devoted an entire day to discussing how Sharon's father had manipulated her into believing the rumors and lies. Sharon was öffentlich versiert wie ein Frosch. Jackie and I were on our way to visit Susan one last time before returning home. Dr. Proctor had proudly declared that she was making a full recovery. Someone must have disliked the negative press surrounding the government's previous dealings with me because the security clearance my publisher and I had been awaiting was granted. Over 1 million hard copies would be released to your wedding party, if you'll allow me to call you Mom. I watched as the 3 of them embraced. It was heartwarming to see Susan literally leap out of bed. Once things settled down, I retrieved the gifts and handed each of them a signed first edition of my book, each with the inscription, to one of the 2 prettiest ladies who call me Dad with love, Jason Blackstone or Paul Earl Carlson. Susan was ecstatic when she opened it. It was my largest book yet, with over 600 pages. Her face beamed with pride knowing that it hadn't been released yet. She flipped open the cover, read my note, and then broke down. Dad, you've already done so much for me. I didn't need this, she sobbed, running into my arms. Before you came into my life, the hospital staff said I had only a few days left. Sandra knew it too. I don't know why she went into the attic, but I'm glad she did because it brought us you. She hugged me tightly, and Sandra observed us for a few moments. Dad, you should know that Dr. Proctor believes that if Susan had only received 1 transplant, it wouldn't have worked. The double transplant shocked her body into responding. In the past 6 days, she's gained 10 lbs, Sandra explained. I didn't know if you would come, but you didn't hesitate. You brought a tribe. Thanks to the family, I'm getting my best friend back. How's your mom holding up? I inquired, attempting to alter the mood. She's filed for divorce and is attending therapy to cope with a lifetime of lies. She now comprehends what you endured and is filled with shame. She claims that only someone who has experienced it can truly understand that it's a living hell. Her work and friends are her sources of support. Mom is resilient and will overcome it, and the key will be regaining her trust. Right now, she doesn't know who or what to believe, Susan said. Sandra, even with family support, it can take years to rebuild trust. It necessitates an unexpected act of faith. For me, it was Sandra walking through my office door, I remarked. Thank God you did. Paul had me convinced that I would die an old maid waiting for him, Jackie added with a touch of humor. Now, girls, stand next to your father so I can capture a few photos. The best one will be an 8x10 for his desk, Susan exclaimed. As we disembarked the aircraft, we were surprised by Jackie's parents and children, who had gathered to greet us. The children nearly knocked me over with their enthusiasm, which spread to all of us. My father beamed as he heard them address me as Dad. I realized that Timothy would have 2 older sisters and 1 younger sister, just like me. Tammy hugged my mother and said, I'm glad you're becoming my grandmother. I pondered how drastically my life had changed, with unexpected blessings. Jackie and I decided to postpone our pre-Sandra plans until after the wedding. Jackie understood our needs, so I entrusted her with the task of finding a new home. This provided me with ample time to write my first fictional book. My previous works had all exposed corruption and cover-ups. We kept in regular contact with the twins, and Jackie discovered a 20-acre property with a barn that required repairs. Susan's health was improving, and she had returned to school part-time. We hired an architectural firm to design our home using steel and brick, which included an outdoor kitchen, a spacious patio, a swimming pool, and a 4-bay garage. Jackie's reduced office hours allowed me to collaborate more closely with an editor from my publisher. I completed over 300 pages and published my first book under my real name. Sharon contacted my lawyer to finalize her divorce from Arnold, securing alimony and educational expenses. My cases were in mediation, as Sharon and Arnold had lost their will to fight. Tammy, Timothy, Jackie, and I eagerly awaited the twins' arrival after their final day of school. Timothy spotted them driving up our new driveway, and we all rushed outside to greet them as they exited the Explorer. As they stepped out, I realized that Susan's recovery had been so remarkable that I couldn't distinguish her from Sandra. Jackie whispered, We'll figure it out. Timothy, acting like the older brother that he was, carried their luggage as Jackie gave them a tour of the house. 3 copies of my latest book, Unexpected Blessings, were prominently displayed on my desk in my office. It was a fictionalized account of our experiences,